Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Gazen.
And I'm Leslie Adamy. At the top tonight, we begin with the latest on the tension over the presidential transition. President Trump has not yet conceded the race as his team presses ahead with legal challenges in battleground states. This as several Republican leaders, including some here in Texas, also continue to promote claims of massive voter fraud despite no evidence.
Our Bill Churchwell spoke with Congressman Michael Cloud today, who was here for a Veterans Day event. Cloud has been one of President Trump's most consistent supporters, and that is still very much the case now. And it is our top story at 10.
Congressman Michael Cloud taking time to honor local war heroes during this Veterans Day ceremony aboard the USS Lexington. The congressman who represents District 27 just recently won his re-election bid and is among members of the Republican Party who topped the ballot in the Lone Star State. When it comes to the presidential election, Cloud and others in his party have doubled down to back President Trump on what has become a crusade to find proof of election fraud.
For Americans to have confidence in an election, they need to know that it was held fairly. And there's a number of anomalies, let's say, in this election process that are worth looking into.
President Trump and several Republican followers have yet to acknowledge the results for the presidential race, claiming the election was stolen. Just yesterday, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick announced a reward of up to $1 million for information on any possible instances of voter fraud here in Texas. And last week, as a guest on a radio show, Cloud said it was disturbing that, quote, they won't let poll watchers in after a judge's order. He was referring to vote counting going on in states like Pennsylvania. But the online newspaper, the Texas Tribune, fact-checked the congressman, reporting his claim simply was not true. Political expert Dr. Bill Chris weighed in on the push to investigate the outcome of the election during 3 News at 6.
The truth is that there wasn't anything significantly wrong with this election. The truth is that when the recounts are finished, they will not change the result.
Meanwhile, Cloud says he still believes it is important that any claims are investigated despite there being no evidence of any wrongdoing.
Too often, especially in the national media, unfortunately, people willing to dismiss journalists who are supposed to be the most curious individuals on the planet, that's the profession, willing to dismiss claims without doing any due diligence at all. And so there's statistical anomalies, if you look at the data, that lead people to question.
He admits that he doesn't know exactly where those questions will lead, but that it is important to find out so the public can be confident in the electoral process. Bill Churchwell, 3 News.